Welcome to the Crystal Zinn podcast. I believe our bodies are a living map of the entire universe. All the answers reside within. Remember, you are sovereign, whole, and infinitely valuable. And the best gift we can give to the world is our own healing. Join me as we explore holistic tools, spiritual practices, and paradigms that are shifting the way people experience life, business, and relationships. I love to share education on the most recent medical research and cutting-edge technology on anatomy, neurology, trauma, development, and more to give us a foundation in understanding how to align, utilize, and upregulate our physical systems. Ultimately, this podcast is a witness and support to people on their journey of remembering, an inspiration for all of us to keep going, and a reminder that we are not alone. Welcome to the Crystal Zinn podcast. And welcome, Nancy. It's so good to have you here this morning.
Thank you. Delighted to be here. My virtual assistant, her name is Crystal. So there you go.
It is?
Yep.
Oh, wow. That's so neat.
She's in Edmonton, Alberta, so the West Coast.
Oh, okay.
So for her to join us this morning would have been in the middle of the night for her. So.
Oh, no.
But she's terrific.
I think you're 2 hours ahead of me, so it's not too bad, I don't think, for either of us. It's actually nice to get things done before the children and the world starts going.
I love it. I love it too.
Well, I just want the listeners to know that I met Nancy online. We were chatting through email, and when we finally got to have a little FaceTime call, I was just so excited about the things she was saying because it was pertinent in my life and seems to be pertinent in a lot of people's lives that I've been talking to recently. Just a good reminder of how to keep yourself whole, healthy, and where some of those connections are in the businesses and careers that we're pursuing alongside all of the really big, important things. So I appreciate you being here and chatting with us. I've got a couple questions for you. And the first thing I do on my podcast is just tune in for a minute or two. So if you're willing to join us, we just sit back in our chairs, close our eyes. And if the listeners are in a place where it's safe to do so, they can also close their eyes or just take an inward gaze. And we just take a breath. A lot of times, this is the first time we've done this today, whenever you're listening to this. Exhale and wiggle your jaw, shake out your head, roll your shoulders a little bit. Start to settle down all the thoughts, the energies around your body. Within 9 seconds of waking up, our brain will replay old patterns, start working off the past, and start running software just based on our lives thus far. And it's really nice to clear that out, especially first thing in the morning. And you may start to notice a pattern in your breath. Just observe, no need to change anything. And in just that observing, you may notice there's more space to inhale, expand there. And maybe more space or a little bit longer exhale. And just simply weave through the feelings in your body. Maybe tightness in the neck, softness in the shoulders, pressure here, space there. We're going to slowly take any heaviness or pain or restriction in your body and just start to weave it down through your body, like maybe you're standing under a waterfall or grains of sand in an hourglass. And when it drops to the bottom, any parts of you that are touching the surface beneath you, feel into that space, become acutely aware of the pressure, sending any heaviness all the way into the floor, into the foundation if you're in a building, into the ground if you're outside. And then in your mind's eye, notice any space you have right now or imagine more space you want, and then just ask yourself the question, what would I create with this space? And as always, if you need more time here for yourself, just pause and join us later when you feel ready and your mind is calm to listen. And if you feel complete, come back now. A final breath and exhale, blinking of the eyes. Thanks for joining us in that. So the first thing I wanted you guys to know about Nancy is one, I have just been drawn to her wisdom and some of the things she's moved through that I could learn from, and kind of how she created a more holistic approach to the wealth advisory process. So I'm wondering if you could give us a brief overview of how you started in business and consulting in wealth, and how and why that brought in, or you felt it was so important to bring in the health component.
Well, one of my pieces of advice is to pay attention to what other people think you should do, because I was recruited into the wealth advisory business. And once I got there, I was sorry I hadn't been there 20 years earlier. So if this one woman hadn't turned my head and said, Nancy, I think this would be a great place for you, I would not have been in wealth advisory. But once I got there, obviously I need to find some clients. I need to build my practice. And so I started to focus on women and wealth. This was in the 90s. So that's just when women were really starting to pay attention to investing and all of the aspects that go with it. But as I met with these women, and they would be in couples, you would realize that women have a disproportionate amount of responsibility for their family's health. We often think that men are the one that look at men are the ones that look after the investments, but women, of course, the mothers are the ones who are expected to be the nurse practitioner on location. So that's when I started to focus equally on health and wealth, realizing that health always comes first. If you don't have your health, it doesn't matter how much money you've got. So I had them equally as cornerstones to building out your life's plan.
Hmm. That's important. I don't think I've ever had anyone point that out to me. And I don't know if it was assigned to me or self-assigned or culturally or collectively assigned, but that is absolutely what I find. Even the businesses that I find that my women friends are in, are health businesses, right? They're either oils or supplements or something that actually does have to do with your health, or they're like fitness instructors, right? Like I got my start as a yoga instructor. And so a lot of listeners are some sort of fitness instructors in the industry with that then comes along with all those things. So it's such a natural thing too, right? When you're taking care of other people to just be so honed in on that health aspect. And I always have this big conflict in me, which sometimes there's this voice saying, well, either or, right? Either or. Either you're home doing these things and you're focusing on your health, or you're focusing on business and money. And there's not an easy either connection or weave or flow there, or you almost feel like you are taking advantage or perverting that if you're trying to make money doing things like that, right? Or
Mhm.
vice versa. Or if you're doing money and you're trying to bring in a health component, it somehow lessens the quality. What are your thoughts there?
I think it all ties in with the ongoing phrase of work-life balance, and I really really do not like that phrase because people always feel that something's missing. But to your point, what we each do on a daily basis is make priorities. When you wake up in the morning, what are my priorities for the day? We're doing this podcast early because your priority for the day obviously is to do your business, but you've got a family outing. And so that's my point. What are my priorities for the day? And each of us are smart enough to figure out in our head what those priorities are and never feel guilty. Like this is who you are driving your life forward, making those priorities. And we're smart enough to know that we shouldn't compromise our health in order to achieve whatever our business goal is. It's like if you're late for a meeting, why would you speed up and run the risk of having an accident? If you're late for the meeting, I'm awfully sorry, but I'm late for the meeting. Just slow yourself down. So it's an ongoing priority setting focus that has you living your best life and moving forward into your future.
I love that. And it's a lot of little nuanced
It is.
decisions in each moment. You can't take some overall like theory and say, this is what it's going to be every time, because that I think
No,
is where a lot of the guilt comes in the area I work with,
correct.
self-alignment and meditation and a lot of self-evolution and healing. I love that you
Mhm.
mentioned that guilt and shame piece, because as soon as that enters, how can you make a choice anymore? How can you make a free choice when you're acting out of compensation or guilt? Or, like you said, I'm guilty of that. I'm guilty of rushing to things and getting my breath all in a knot and my head all, because I'm thinking this is more important. But I love that reframe that if your safety and your health is always the most important thing, how are you going to show up at that point? So, when you started doing this, my question is, did you completely refocus on health, or did you just do wealth consulting with your clients and then like send them resources other places, or did you just completely refocus? Like, what do you actually coach people on? What does that look like for you?
Well, normally the health world and the wealth world are not connected. They're two separate organizations. Think of the hospital, think of all the doctors and the nurses and healthcare professionals, and then think of the wealth world. It's the big tower, it's the stock exchange, it's whatever. And women who are my clients with this disproportionate amount of responsibility to their family's health, how do you know if heart disease is the leading cause of death for women? How do you know what the symptoms are? Because we know the symptoms for women are quite different from those of men, because a lot of the research has been done on men, not on women. That, of course, is now changing. And so the best thing that I can do, I mean, I'm not a medical person that has all the answers to everything, is to connect with all these not-for-profit health-related organizations that were focusing on women's health. So I would host an event with whatever that organization was, like the Heart and Stroke Foundation or breast cancer or cancer research. And those groups are more than willing to make themselves available, because the best thing they can do is to have opportunities so their awareness, what they do, is expanded. So they love those increasing awareness opportunities. So my women clients would come, they'd bring their friends with them. We'd hear the presentation. Now you've got some new information, but equally important, you now have a go-to contact. In the absence of that, who are you going to talk to? Good luck trying to get your doctor to ask a question of. You're not going to drive into a merge to ask a question. Well, now you've got a contact to go to gather more information. I also would charge a nominal amount like $25 or $50, and that was a charitable receipt, which then, of course, adds to your net worth and your overall wealth plan. You see how that donation has a positive impact on your personal bottom line. But also, as we know, if you're in a position to give or share, it enhances your self-worth. So that's when I tied in net worth and self-worth. And of course, Women Worth and Wellness is 31 years old this year, now leaning into a lot of philanthropy and legacy planning, because women are earning so much more. But more importantly, they are inheriting incredible amounts of wealth from their parents and potentially from their spouses longer term. So that simple idea of a charitable gift, fast forward, becomes a philanthropic focus. Who do you care about? Who would you like to support? And your legacy plan. As we all know, nobody knows. We all know that nobody gets out of here alive. On the other hand, nobody knows when that day will come. So the best wealth plan is one where you have anticipated worst case scenario. and you've prepared for it. You expect the best, but you're prepared for the worst.
Hmm. There, I feel like you just gave us a lifetime's worth of advice in that paragraph.
There you go.
I wrote some things down because it sounds like a big part of that is connection and education for
Right,
women. Um,
right,
and I hadn't thought of that before because we are so busy and we are
right.
so in depth and assigned in our roles. So, where can we make these connections and how can we have that as an ongoing basis? So, being part of something like your program or your organization having a place that's bringing these resources to you on a consistent basis feels really important to me. Throughout the years, I've tapped into different groups, either business groups or mommy groups. And I really feel that when I'm not part of that, that my world kind of shrinks, right?
Hmm.
And I
Right.
don't get those ideas. So I love that advice. It sounds like you're saying where you really want to be part of something, something that brings you the resources and something that you can go listen to a seminar here. We have a group where I live in the state I live called Women in Leadership.
Perfect.
And even in parts of my life where I can't be a part of a lot of things outside the home, I am at least getting bi-monthly emails where
Right.
I can read through all the things they're involved in. And sometimes my brain even goes, gosh, when I have more time, I would like to go to those things or attend those
Mhm.
things or just be more involved in other ways. So, one, I wonder what your other suggestion is for women to get out and be part of those things. What have you seen? How important it is? Um, and then I want to ask you more questions about this philanthropy and legacy planning because we don't hear that as women. We don't hear that when we're coming up in our career.
No,
Even if we go into college or something, we just hear our resources are either for us or they are immediately for everyone that we serve around us, like in one hand and out the other, right?
right, right.
So I guess I'll go back since that was two big things. So
Mhm.
what are the best ways to continue to educate yourself on health and what's out there for us and how do we get a support system in that area?
Well, if you have a wealth advisor, and I'm sure you probably do, it's
Mhm.
important to have a conversation with that wealth advisor um, as it pertains to your whole plan. Now, normally, when you're a wealth advisor, you're doing investments as well as insurance planning. And insurance planning deals with anticipating a critical illness, anticipating a disability, anticipating, obviously, replacement of income, meaning if you die. And so all of those items are health related. So if you have a whole holistic wealth plan, all of those components should be part of that. When people hear wealth, they think about investments only. What's the best stock that I can buy today that's on sale that I'm going to make $1 million on?
Yeah.
You just and the whole foundation of both of those areas, health and wealth, is to know your client. When you go to a health professional, the first thing they want to do is blood work because they want to get a read on, who are you and what sorts of things should we be considering taking a look at, prescribing, whatever, to help you be healthy. Same thing with the wealth plan. So you can't just roar in and say, okay, new prospect, these are the things that I recommend you buy. No, you've got to find out who is this person, what amount of money they have, what is the purpose of their money, how comfortable do they feel about risk and reward, and, yada, yada, yada. So the wealth advisor should be a really, really good go-to person with a wealth of information about how to stay connected with your health and, of course, your wealth. So I think that's a starting point. Now, I'm a certified financial planner, and I know CFPs are in the US. So one thing you could do, and I always recommend people get a second opinion, whoever you're working with, consider a second opinion because sometimes you outgrow your wealth advisor. You need to get working with somebody else because your profile has increased significantly beyond the advice that that wealth advisor can give you. So a second opinion, if you get a second opinion and you come back to the person you've been working with, that in itself is a wonderful situation because you just say, I know you've been telling me about blah, blah, blah. I got a second opinion. They'll want to know from whom. Just say, I got a second opinion. And you know what? You're absolutely right. So It's all about you looking after you and you seeking information, seeking validation that what you know and what you're doing is the best it possibly can be. And that that person who is serving you really does have your back and does have the professional expertise to give you perhaps more than you expect.
Mm, that's that's so great because I love this idea of having support in it. And that's also another thing that you've probably found working with women is asking for help and even the idea that we have support out there and the wherewithal to do it and the confidence to be stepping into that and managing that seems like a really big thing. I mean, I even am working with a facilitator right now who brought me on to help with some of the money parts of what she's creating. And when I got into it, my advice was actually, girl, you should be doing this actually, and you can do it. And she had never considered before. She'd always had men or friends or
Right,
mentors for her to handle these things in her business. And I just had such a strong feeling that if you don't know what's going on in your portfolio,
right.
in your profile, in your corner like this, you are outsourcing a lot of power and a lot of decisions. And I think that makes, at least I feel, a huge disconnect to some of these bigger ideas that I really want to step into with my heart and my power that I can't if I don't have control or knowledge about that. So the idea that we have support in these spaces and it's okay to go and get a financial planner or something
Right.
like that, I still think where I'm at, it's not such a big thing. It's still something that people think, or at least I've thought, I have to be making a lot of money to have one of those, or my husband has to go get it for my family or something. Is that true?
No. No. And that's why you need to shop around because, there's a plethora of wealth advisors serving all sorts of different kinds of people. And so what you really want to do is find that right person that's going to serve you exceptionally well. You want them to be qualified, but at the same time, you want them to have an attitude of you're the priority. My job is to serve you. This is what I have to offer. But at the end of the day, serving you well is really the sweet spot of that relationship.
Hmm.
So, and women have to just keep asking questions. Tell me again what that means. I don't really understand that. And sometimes women need to have had, if they're not asking the questions, and even a good question is, well, tell me something else that you think I should know that you don't think I do know. Like put those kinds of questions to the person. Like, in other words, stretch your mind out as it pertains to me, what you think I'm missing. Don't just wait for me to ask you the questions because that's extremely limiting.
Oh, that's important. I really like that. Something you mentioned about what does your money mean to you in part of
Right,
the plan? What's it for?
right,
That feels like a really big question that I think for women too, we just assume, of course, our time, money, resources is for everybody else. It's just there's a place that it's going, and I need to work and fulfill that and bring that in because there's already a demand. I
right.
wonder if you could maybe expand my mind or tell me something you think I don't know that maybe give us some ideas. What could money be for? What are some ideas or purposes of how we could think about that?
Mhm.
Like, what has it meant
Well,
to some of your clients?
and again, it varies, a
Yeah.
million different ways.
Yeah.
But you really need to understand the amount of money that women have, the amount of money that they expect to have, and what they want that money to do for them. Like, do you really want to be a sophisticated investor? If you do, then what other sorts of investments are you interested in? The reason I mention that is I was lined up to see a play in Toronto a couple of weeks ago. And there I looked over and I thought, oh my goodness, that's one of my clients from before. She's got sunglasses on. And I said, Jocelyn, is that you? And she said, Nancy. Anyway, she's there with a friend, not her partner. But she said, I can't tell you the amount of times that we talk about you. And I'm thinking, oh no, this is going to be embarrassing. She said, you were so great at giving us advice beyond just our whole wealth plan, but it included investing in real estate. She said, we bought two income properties. And we're so thankful. So I can't remember how that conversation started, but either they asked me or I may have said, have you thought about whatever? And then away we go. You help them get that organized. Anyway, my point is that when you work with a wealth advisor, it's about you, all of you, not just, what stocks are we buying today? It's
Mm.
the works. It's the works.
Yeah. And I think there's so much out there that even I or a lot of people don't even know is possible. Like when I found out my little brother just got married and him and his wife are really big into using their money for properties. And I
Okay.
thought that was something that had never crossed my mind of
Right.
all the different things you can invest in. And then this idea of philanthropy, because I think I want to say intentional philanthropy.
Good for you. Right.
For women, not just, of course, I owe this. Of course, I do this. Of course, I'm giving this to my church and my community and my children's schools, but an intentional philanthropy and then a legacy. What does a legacy look like and mean? Does that mostly mean your children? Like, what are different legacies you've seen women say they want to leave?
Okay. So it's the day after you're gone. What does your world look like? What have you left behind? Now, certainly with children, you want to leave a stamp that has them bringing the best of you forward that they never forget. And of course, you're living that every single day. But more and more, it also includes giving back in such a way that you are creating a better world. You can do things that are the immediate and now within your own little bailiwick, whatever it may be. But there also is the opportunity to go beyond that and care about what in the world is going on and what possibilities do I have to make that difference in the world. Um, Often I suggest that when people are young, when I first passed my insurance exam, you're not licensed until you've sold an insurance policy. So our daughter came back from university. She was 19 years old. And I said, okay, Julia, you need to have a life insurance policy. She's looking at me like, what are you on about now? And so course, and the best time to buy life insurance is when you're young, because that's when you're the healthiest and that's when it's the least expensive. But the big idea is you buy it when you're young, and normally you buy life insurance to replace income. So then you get a job and you've got income, and you don't necessarily need it to replace income unless you've got, family demands, whatever. But keep that insurance policy, and when you become 60, you don't need replacement income anymore. You then direct it to a charity. And that insurance policy, when you die, you have 100% deduction. It enhances your bottom line to an incredible extent. But buy it when you're young and then keep it all the way along. And there's all sorts of different kinds of insurance you can get. An insurance professional is the person who can tell you all the different possibilities.
Yeah, and that's what I'm wondering. So, like a wealth advisor, financial planner, they're sort of like the manager of this
It
and
works.
like a personal coach and support. But all these
Right.
avenues you're mentioning, like advice in these smaller categories, those may be outsourced to different people and
Right.
things, right? Is there a person that does all of it or no?
Yes, there is. But
Oh,
it's like going into a shop that has a whole variety of offerings for you to pick and choose from.
mm,
Same thing with a wealth advisor. What they've got is a whole suite of investment possibilities, a
mm,
whole raft of them, just all sorts of different things. Same thing with insurance. Same
mm.
thing with insurance, which protects, critical illness, disability, all those sorts of things. And of course, people say, I can't afford insurance. I was talking to this one woman in New York. She was shocked. She said, nobody has ever talked to me about insurance. Meanwhile, she's got investment properties. I said, do you have insurance on your investment property? It's
Yes,
no different.
yes.
It's no different.
Yeah.
You're anticipating, all sorts of things that can go wrong. You can't afford not to have insurance.
Mm. This is the piece that really stuck out to me when I was talking to you earlier because you made this connection of if you have these things in order, or you have
Right.
support, or you have an idea, you're starting to take some power in these areas, which women are, whether they like it or not. Most women
Yes.
I know are even running the finances in their home, regardless if they're, even if they're not
Perfect.
putting in all of that.
Yep.
But you said something to the effect of that affects your health in
Of
such a
course.
huge way, be just by having those things in order. And I could remember instantly so many times in my life when the finances and the wealth were in chaos. I was a single mommy for a lot of years when I was younger. Um, and was on some aid from the state and was trying to work and get an education and dig myself out of some things. And my health suffered. It
Right.
suffered when I didn't feel safe or didn't provide some sort of plan for my safety and my basic needs in this area.
Mhm.
So I know that what you were saying seems really true. And I wonder what you've seen in that area. Have you seen people's health improve by having financial safety and stability?
Definitely. Because we really take our health for granted. You know, we exploit our health constantly. We just take it for granted. And that's how we go too far to one side. You know, when you're under that amount of stress, you just expect your whole body to keep up. But sometimes you have to just say stop. And sometimes it's something else that stops us. You know, we're still on that big, huge track of motoring on, and then something just says, you know, you have a breakdown, whatever. So I think, you know, my point with Women Worth and Wellness is that you have respect for your health first and always be conscious of your health. Always be conscious to the extent that you can. You know, you can't have it be over all encompassing or overwhelming, but always be respectful of your health and not push it to the limit. Like, really don't push it to the limit because the consequences are too severe when something happens. Like if you trip and fall down the stairs
Mhm.
because you were taking too much stuff down at one time, like don't do it. Like just don't do it.
Yes. It's so much easier said than done, though. Like, now we
I
can talk
know.
about it. I can feel so many things as just like, I have to, I've got to. If I just carry one more thing and if I just show up for one more thing, I was talking to another associate because we are actually running a retreat in Italy.
Oh,
For,
super.
yeah, for this purpose, we leave on June 1st, and almost every single woman on our call this week for kind of our final preparations had said something like, I have taken care of everyone, my entire life, or I just raised
Right.
babies, or I'm 70 years old and I cannot remember the first time I did something like this for me and my health. And of course, you are going to have a serious wealth plan or some things in order to be able to take off for 2 weeks to leave the
Correct.
country and finance it and be able to feel okay when you're there. And I was just like, there's this huge disconnect because I'm trying to do these things younger, set myself up for a position where I can be taking care of myself along the way while I'm building.
Right.
But those gas stations, like those things to be able to do for yourself, I feel like are everything. And I do have to tell you that even the women I was talking to, the guilt surrounding it, like the mental gymnastics they have to do to even say, I can do something like this. And I'm not saying it always has to be that big, like you're saying, don't trip and fall, don't take too many things off the shelf, like take some mental health days along the way. This is a bigger example of that, and they don't always have to be that big.
Mhm.
But the mental gymnastics I've had to see, even myself and these women make to get to a place like that where they can take care of themselves, it's still not part of the culture. It's still not okay. And it's not even just women, because I was curious what you thought about that, because even my husband was going on a nicer work trip. He's worked his way into a company where he's getting towards upper management. And so when he goes on a work trip, he finally got to stay in a nicer hotel and
Wonderful.
it had some downtime, and
Right.
the company was paying for his meals, and he was like, I just don't feel like I can enjoy this. Like I feel like I should be taking the family with me or something. And I was like, you were always so stressed out.
Right.
Like what is wrong with just enjoying a couple hours of your life
Correct.
because of what you've created? And that may create the mental space and break
Straight.
that, yes, and that you will be able to perform
Correct.
even better doing things like that. So I love when you bring that up, it just expands, like you said, our mind into where are the crossovers and how do these mental and health and wealth, wellness sort of ideas, you can't actually pull them apart. Like it
No,
reminds me of
no,
the medical industry. You can't treat each system separately. And we
no.
know this now. And that's why this
Right.
holistic approach is coming up. And I was asked to do this last year or two more and more public speaking gigs, workshop gigs, things in the business community where they want me to come in and teach mental and spiritual wellness.
Wonderful.
And I keep thinking, yeah, you're right. This is going to benefit you and your company and your employees. So
Right.
I know you just got my mind going in so many areas about how important this is. And I am curious, how many women, how much money are we talking about? How many women in their later part of life are inheriting a lot of money and what are they doing with it? I didn't even think about that.
Huge, 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 huge. My new best friend is in Beirut, and I did a a presentation. It was an online PowerPoint, but I tied in. There's a McKinsey report. You should dial that up, and they presented it at the Global Economic Forum and at Davos this past January.
Mm-hmm.
So this was the health component, talking about the incredible um, impact globally
Mm-hmm.
of women's health and wellness, and why it, of course, is not paid enough attention to. And had we only paid that much more attention to it, this would be the ripple effect. And then on the other hand, I focused on women in philanthropy. And one of our banks in Canada did a big, huge study talking about the number of women who are obviously women are earning more. So you're stewarding that wealth from earnings, but inheriting from boomer parents. But then eventually, assuming your partner is male, the life expectancy of a female is greater than the male, chances are you're going to be inheriting that wealth as well. And so, how are you going to put this all together? Especially the whole philanthropic focus. Huge, because women's philanthropy is so different from men's. It's much quieter. How many hospital wings have you seen named after a woman? I mean, more and more you see couples names, which is great, but women just are not trailblazers when it comes to philanthropy, except with Melinda French Gates and Mackenzie Scott and what they're doing, which is fabulous. Of course, their husbands took off with some sweet young thing and left them. And then they had inherited all this money, and they're like, okay, let's go. Who do I want to support? They're not just keeping it for themselves and, buying high-end whatever. And they're really becoming role models for, especially Melinda French Gates with her daughters. So again, that's a legacy statement that you've chosen something, but you're also role modeling. So it just depends. It just depends. Apparently, single um, female teachers are
Uh-huh.
some of the greatest philanthropists, which
Really?
is interesting. Now, if you were a teacher, then you've seen all sorts of different aspects to society.
Uh,
And so that's when you may think about, and if you don't have immediate children, you've probably got an extended family. You can understand why they would end up becoming significant philanthropists.
wow, that's so beautiful. I don't want to make any comments on gender roles, but there's
Oh,
obviously the research at that worldwide convention that supports that. And that's
correct.
so good to know. And it tends me to want to say, yeah, money in the hands of women is a good thing.
Very.
In the things that I research and study and do a lot of holistic healing arts, there's this idea and this thing that's true that I don't know that I've seen any research backed, but it's an idea that constantly swirls around as kind of evidence based. And in my experience, when a woman heals, when I have a lot of women clients kind of entering this healing journey and to start taking care of themselves, then the entire family benefits. And we all know that
Correct.
in the world,
Ex
like
Yep.
law, right? Like
Right.
you want to focus on the women. One of the first books I ever read on this journey 20 years ago was a book called first kill all the marriage counselors.
Right, right.
And the premise of the book was deeply care for the woman and heal
Yes,
the woman. And so when she's in a position of power, whether that's mental, emotional, spiritual, or monetary, we can almost guarantee 100% of the time that it provides abundance and everyone else benefits from it. So of course, why would that be any different in finances?
right.
You
The
know,
ripple effect, ripple effect.
the ripple effect. That's so
Yep. We have
beautiful.
one incredible philanthropist in Toronto.
Mhm.
And well, a couple of stories. One was she was diagnosed with breast cancer. So we have this huge hospital, one of the best in the world, one of the three best, Princess Margaret Hospital. She went and meets with the initial specialist, and they said, "Okay, this is the protocol. Well, you need to come back and have an appointment with," and blah 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 blah. She said, "This is ridiculous." Because think of all these people who come from afar, who don't have wealth, who have to book accommodation every time they come back to see that extra specialist or whatever. She said, why wouldn't a person, when they come in here initially for that initial, they then meet with all these others like a one-day event? They said, oh, that would be impossible. She said, well, why is it impossible? Oh, because it would be way too expensive. Well, how expensive would it be? They said at least $25 million. She donated $25 million, and that's now part of their protocol
Oh my
because it
goodness.
made perfectly good sense. I mean, that's the power of her philanthropy. But apparently during COVID, what she did, she's been directing funds to, I think, three or four or five main organizations. During COVID, she knew a lot of the smaller organizations didn't have an executive director, couldn't afford. So she said, help me find those really, really small, not-for-profit organizations that I can help, give a leg up, give some funds to. So, the power of philanthropy is incredible, really incredible.
And what did you mean by women's philanthropy is quieter?
Well, just women don't march around and put their names on things to the same extent as men do. If a woman did that, other women would go, "Who the heck does she think she is?"
Ah,
Like, like
yeah. But
women
then we
just,
miss out on those stories because that's what I was thinking. You got me thinking, and I has so many examples of even just women in my community at all different levels, and especially very small ones, where they actually are funding things and giving things. Like one thing me and one of my partners have been doing for the last 20 years around here is running a yearly yoga festival where
oh, super,
every single part of the yoga community, the teachers, all the studios, any donors, we put on this huge event, and each year we decide a different charity. So all the proceeds of that go to
wonderful.
charity. And I was like, wow, we really did a good thing. And I was like, that is really cool. And everyone who participated in that gave in a small way. And as I worked with women entrepreneurs and women who do this, they actually are all doing that at levels, but nobody records it. Nobody puts their name on it. Nobody says anything. So from that level to Melinda Gates level, that's fascinating to me. And I wonder, and it sounds like you're saying there is a benefit for us making
Yes,
that more public and putting our names on it because
yes,
it tells other women it's possible and it's a role model thing. And I never
yes,
thought of it like that because I didn't even know
definitely.
about several things you mentioned on this call in women in philanthropy.
Yep. Role modeling positive behavior is a really, really important thing to do because more often than not, the news is about role modeling of bad behavior. So
Mm,
role modeling of positive behavior is so, so, so important. So
mm,
important. I'm a Rotarian. I'm the president of our local club here, and we have the four-way test as a Rotarian.
what's that?
And the club decided, like you don't want it to be like a cult where you're repeating blah, blah, blah. And so they decided the four-way test would be repeated once monthly. Okay. So with all the craziness that's going on in the world, I said, no, we're going to do this every single week. And the four-way test is very simply the number one is it the truth? Is it the truth? And number two, is it fair to all concerned? Number three is, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And four is, will it be beneficial to all concerned? Well, with everything that's going on in the world, I said we're going to repeat this every week. And people have not resisted. I mean, the number one is it the truth? Because we know how so many things are being challenged because it's not the truth. It isn't the truth. And
Mm-mm.
we're believing it as the truth. So if you're speaking, are you speaking the truth or not? You know, it's fundamental. But again, it's like our health, you take it for granted. Of course it's the truth. Well, is it the truth? So,
Yeah.
and anyway, it's really, really interesting how you really just, it's just going back to basics that we've just kind of overridden because it's too basic. It's like, well, of course.
Yeah, you're right. A lot of that is taken for granted. And like you
Yeah,
said, in women's roles, a lot of that has been communally assigned and self-assigned anyways. But bringing intention and awareness and role modeling it and actually bringing
right.
it forward, I think is the most powerful concept. And like you said, you quoted me some statistic too earlier about just, I didn't realize how many women actually are like coming into power, having
Big
money
time.
in these positions,
Right.
and 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 the fact that even that is sort of a statistic and things that is kind of floating under the radar is kind of a crazy thing. And like, I love that you said balance too. Yes, we
Right.
like that phrase work-life balance, but yeah, the pendulum can swing, both ways where it goes too far the other way, and that also affects women's health as
Yes.
well. Like a lot of the latest trauma research in the areas I walk in is if a woman swings way too far the other way as well, and then forgets those roles of health and wellness, that's detrimental as well. So just this
Yes.
mindful concern, it feels like a marathon, not a sprint,
Right.
for us to move into these spaces. And you've obviously been ahead of the curve and got to watch that happen as you lived it. I feel like a lot of us just have kind of shown up at this space going, wow, we're a little overwhelmed. And overwhelm was a big theme you talked about before. Something for me and my friends in my 40s that we're creating as a passion project is to bring a lot of these resources and tools to women in their 20s that have been asking for it.
Super. Wonderful.
But
Wonderful.
they've woken up in a world, the feedback I'm getting, that is so overwhelming. And they even look to women in their 40s saying, you seem so much safer and sure of yourself,
Hmm.
which we don't feel because we look to women like you and say that. But
Right. Right. Exactly.
they're waking up in even a crazier, more scary world with the overwhelm. So I'm wondering if you have just a minute, especially here at the end, to give us some ways of mitigating. What are some ideas and tools and really great advice I know you give about hearing all of this and also going, how could I ever? That sounds so overwhelming. Um,
Right.
what's some help there to mitigate that overwhelm?
Well, one thing that is a big concern, and we've had a couple of presentations locally recently, and actually one of my Rotarian leaders has challenged me on the women worth and wellness. They said, Nancy, because women were left behind for so long, and women are just getting their strength in so many ways. I mean, it's a huge, huge topic. But the question that comes up is what about men? And we know that men, young men in particular, are the ones that are feeling overwhelmed and threatened and left out. And
Mm,
that is a big concern. That is a really, really big concern because we assume, and again, it's like your health, we take for granted that young men will aspire to be educated and get a job, get a career. But if all these women are doing so exceptionally well and they're beating me to the punch in some places, now I'm being left behind. So I think it's just something to be aware of and pay attention to. Um, with Rotary, we've got the president of or the principal from the high school coming to speak. And at the beginning of the year, I said, how do we know that we're supporting the right aspects of youth and their well-being? Why don't we find out what's going on in the high school? I mean, we assume that we know. Well, do we know? Well, no, we don't know. So it'll be interesting to hear what she has to say because it's all about society. It's all about the world we live in. And like our health, the more we can increase our awareness of what's happening that's different from what our thinking is, I think the better the world will be. Because once you increase your awareness, then you can determine whether you want to do anything about it or not. But if you don't have the awareness, then you don't have that choice.
Yeah.
So, regardless of when we have lived, what age and stage, I think the world's always been overwhelming one way or another. But increasing your awareness about what's going on and
Mm.
how can you make the world a better place is really the opportunity, I think. And whether or not you want to, not everybody does.
Yeah. Or we would
Not
say,
every,
do you feel called to it? Does it feel alive in you right now? And is it aligned for you right now? I love timeline questions too, especially for women because we
yes,
move through stages. And so it's a big timeline question where I had my astrology read once, and a Vedic astrologer told me, in your 50s is when you are going to, all the stars align for you, and when you're the most expansive and the most service oriented. And whether that's true or not, I don't know, but I like the idea of giving me
right.
a timeline
Yes.
that it's okay that this period of time is for this period of time is for this, and maybe you haven't lost out. You don't have to
Mhm.
do it all now. And I think that's what a lot of your wealth and financial planning comes into play as well, as it gives your brain a perspective that
Yes.
feels like it satisfies, the left brain, and then
Mhm.
it can relax and quiet down and show
Mhm.
up, mindfully in the moment. I wonder,
Right.
Nancy, if you have any last pieces of advice before I ask how people can get a hold of you and be part of what you're doing. Is there anything like on your heart after having these years and wisdom and what you're even still creating, which is still new things? That you want to tell us, or just a beautiful message maybe you wish you had known earlier on?
I just think the most important thing is that you own your life, that you own it, like it is your unique life. And you decide what you want, and you decide how to be the best that you possibly can be. And that, of course, includes your health, and that includes the amount of money you have, and that includes, community and everything that you're part of. But know that your life is a blessing. Not everybody has all the advantages that we have. And even though we think we don't have everything that we want to have, we still, excuse me, have a whole lot more than most people do. So how are you going to make the most of the blessing that you have been given? An area that I really want to start focusing on is more on philanthropy. And that is, I would call it Women's Age of Integrity. And an age of integrity is, I can't believe I've lived this long. I can't believe I've done this well. It's like, okay, now what? And I'm thinking of sort of the 70 plus. Well, I was with this lady the other day and she said she is a real rock star, this one. She and her husband bought the oldest community newspaper in Canada, 1830, and each of them are English professors at two different universities.
Oh,
And they bought this paper and they want journalism for community enhancement. And they're just turning the page on here and on yet another thing. I mean, they're just unbelievable. And so I shared this idea with her. She said, I love it. But she said, start at age 55, like start younger. So she and I'll probably work on this because, there's so many women that are so amazing. And that's what I want to do is profile them first and let other people see who they are and what they're doing and how they really are making a big, big difference. Big difference.
wow. Thank you.
So lots of
I feel inspired. I'm so glad I heard this. I think I told you that when we talked before. I said, I don't know where this podcast will land. I know people want to hear it, but I really want to
wonderful.
spend time with you. So I appreciate that so much. If people want to see what you're doing, how can they stay in the know and how can they contact you?
Well, the website is www.womenworthwellness.com. So they
Okay.
can go there and we're on all the social media channels. So I think once they, dial that up, they'll see where we are. And there are a lot of the events that we've done are there, YouTube, so they can check that out. But and again, my email is just nancy@womenworthwellness.com. So people can reach out anytime they want. It's a 24/7 operation. You may not get a response immediately, but you'll get a response at some point.
Yes.
Definitely.
In the right timing. That always happens. Well,
Exactly.
I just appreciate you so much, and I appreciate you being in the age of integrity, um, and and giving back. Like I said, it's inspiring, it's fulfilling, it's lifting up the next generation of women, and this has definitely been one of the best ways I've started off my day. So,
Thank you for
thank
listening.
you.
Well,
Connect with me on
you're welcome, and
Instagram at
thank you,
Crystal
Crystal.
Zinn Yoga. Subscribe on my website at crystalzinnyoga.com to receive tools and practices for your holistic journey and to be the first to know about offerings, workshops, trainings, and retreats. We live in powerful times that require courage, bravery, compassion, authenticity, community, and grounding. You're not alone. Check out my free content, classes, and meditations on YouTube under Crystal Zinn Yoga, and have a beautiful day. Sat Nam.